Good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm a bookseller at Literati Bookstore in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're so pleased to welcome Todd Boss in support of the Someday Plan of a Town and conversation with Linda Gregerson. Just a quick webinar overview for those of you who are just joining us. The chat is closed this evening, but you can keep the chat window open as I'll be sharing links to purchase Someday the Plan of a Town from Literati throughout the event. And live transcription is available to you on the bottom of your screen as well using the CC icon should you need it. And you can interact with us at any time by using the Q&A feature of the webinar. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time. I'll ask a selection of those at the conclusion of the reading and conversation. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, be sure to check out the description for links to purchase books. And you can also like and subscribe to our videos to make sure you are kept up to date with all of our At Home with Literati events once they become available on our channel. And as a reminder, you can always shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And of course, if you live in Southeast Michigan or the Ann Arbor area, our doors are open to the public for in-store shopping. Most of all, though, we'd just like to thank you for your attendance this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us. So without further ado, I'll introduce tonight's author and our interlocutor. Todd Boss is the author of 3 previous collections of poetry, most recently Tough Luck. His work has appeared in the New Yorker, Poetry, American Poetry Review, and other publications. Still nomadic, Boss has most recently been based in Phoenix, Arizona, and Austin, Texas. And joining him after a reading and conversation is Linda Gregerson, the author of 6 previous collections of poetry. Most recently Canopy, which we hosted her for an event for very recently. A former chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, Gregerson is the Carolyn Walker Bynum Distinguished University Professor at the University of Michigan. Please join me in welcoming Todd Boss and Linda Gregerson into your living rooms.
Thank you, John. Hey, Todd. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And John, thank you so much, as ever, for your gracious hospitality, and heartfelt thanks to Literati for, making our lives worth living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Every independent bookstore is a labor of love and a miracle for community. And we're so, so grateful to you. Well, you're in for a treat, folks. I have been the president of Todd Boss's fan club since I first saw I saw bound galleys for his very first book, Yellow Rocket, and I was just wowed and have been wowed ever since. He's all kinds of things. How shall I get coherent here? I'm stunned by the aptitudes for joy and wit and in this new volume, some bitterness from time to time, but the range of affective domains and forms of noticing and extraordinary aptitudes and curiosity about the potentials of song. Todd's formal instantiations are quite unusual. I would say unique. He, in American poetry right now, he's got an amazing ear and an incredibly smart and penetrating instinct for improvisation and for daring the limits of formal constraint. And you'll hear this in a number of the poems you'll hear tonight. You'll hear the way he follows a path of sonic affiliation, rhyme, alliteration, near rhyme, various forms of impacted rhythms, as one might follow breadcrumbs through a forest. It's a form of inquiry. It's a form of discovery. It's a form of play. but it's much, much more open than that. It's also at its very best, and it often is at its very best, a way of contemplating the other kinds of constraint and opportunity and secret accordances that we encounter in our life on earth. I want to ask you later, if we have time for it, to say a little something about a sequence that's in one of your previous books, in Tough Luck. There is an extraordinary sequence called Fragments for the 35 West Bridge. And this is the bridge in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that notoriously collapsed some years ago, and killing many people, nearly killing many, many, many others. It's a very heavily trafficked bridge, one that is crossed thousands and thousands of times a day. And all those people who did not die were saved by the grace of God and by, as the title of Todd's book gives us, tough luck or mere luck. The form of this sequence is also extraordinary. It's the 35th West Bridge. How do you say it, Todd? Do you say
35W?
You say 35W. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't live
in
okay. Cities. And it's in 35 sequences, 35 poems, each 35 lines long, and each line is a single word. Now, any of you who have ever tried your hand at any sort of short line poetic form know that that is an almost impossibly demanding set of constraints. It's fresh, it's moving, it's incredibly tough-minded, and it is a very powerful evidencing of the radical precarity of our lives, not just those of us who have to cross bridges that may be falling apart, but all of us. So I'm not going to say, I will say a little bit more, then I'll stop. The premise of this new book is really quite astonishing. Someday the Plan of a Town, and I have various versions of it here, but here's what the very handsome cover looks like. It is written in 5 sections, plus a sort of single poem prelude and a single poem envoy. And the trajectory, roughly, to my mind, as I first encountered it, the trajectory goes from sort of poetry as a kind of guidepost or a raft of wit and recovered feeling through in some harsher terrain, especially in the 4th section, and some alienation, through to a really marvelous recovery of delight that is all the more powerful because the poet has allowed himself those darker moments. And the delight is also the more eloquent precisely because it acknowledges the background of our beloved planet spinning toward apparent doom. So I want to read you the first sentence of the author's introduction to this book. An approach to this book, he writes, in June 2018, I sold nearly everything I owned, gave up my Minneapolis apartment, only half facetiously writing Trump on the reason for leaving line of the lease cancellation form, and began house sitting my way around the world. And I hope later on, Todd will tell us a little something more about that premise and how it affected these poems. But meanwhile, you're going to hear Todd.
Wow, thank you, Linda. That was so beautiful. I wrote half of it down, I think, and I can't wait to dial in and hear it again. You told me some things about myself I wasn't even aware of and didn't even know. That's really sweet of you. Thank you. It's truly an honor to share this space with you tonight, and to have had your very vocal, as you say, fandom all along since the beginning. Truly, sometimes it's a very quiet world, the poetry world. I'm going to share my screen a little bit, and let's see if that works. Maybe John has to flip a switch, but I see the share screen option, and so I'm going to try to do that, and then you'll see me frantically flipping through screens to find the right one. Let's see if this works. Oh no, it looks like it's asking me to do things I'm not sure I should be able to do. Well, never mind then. What I'll do is read.
Is it not letting you should be able to now that you're a co-host.
It's okay. It's sending me through some permissions issues, so I won't worry about it.
Okay.
Thank you though, John. So I think I'll start with the title poem from the collection, Someday the Plan of a Town, which I think I wrote, well, every poem says something at the bottom of it, doesn't it? I think this one occurred to me in Tarifa, Spain, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Tarifa, Spain. I had just come from Morocco, where I'd spent about 2 months house sitting for a Bedouin who does tours, camel tours in the desert. He had a little Pekingese back home, and so I was about 5 or 6 Moroccan blocks from the souk, the marketplace, watching this little dog half the time, and then the other time getting lost in the marketplace. And then I crossed the Mediterranean to Tarifa, Spain, which was surprisingly quieter, and the ocean kind of lapping just put me in a really great frame, and I wrote this poem there. I think it's just about finding a place that you can call home, which of course is a theme I've been preoccupied these past 4 years. Someday the plan of a town, right down to its side tracks and back alleyways, will match, or so goes the dream, with some identical patch of neural network your rogue thoughts roam in. Overlay it like those musculoskeletal transparencies with which anatomy textbooks come bound. And you'll be at home in its dogleg joint work of cobbled kinks, and your body will resound at every fork, tuning fork like. And every road you ever rambled will be re-scrambled to appear to have brought you here where you fit so perfectly, where you can practically predict where to find every bench or post box, and where you can cue every little old lady who leaves her flat to buy bread, as if she were locking up a little room in your head and trading your idea of money for your idea of food before returning to wipe her shoes on the mat your mind's laid flat, and fit her flat key to its shoulder into the strike plate keyhole through which you daily romance her as she grows older. That worn, dome-topped slot that looks as if 2 question marks met on the road to kiss and mate and make one question. Opening, opening, each forever the other's only answer. On the road, I did a lot of thinking too about interconnectedness, our connectedness with others, our connectedness with strangers, how we connect with new places, how we leave the old places behind and still connect with them from afar. I kept I have a list of about 40 friends. This is my to-do list. And along the side of my to-do list, I keep this long list of 40 friends that every month I try to keep up with in some fashion. Some of us just trade movie suggestions. That's our friendship. Others of us, have to have 2-hour-long Sunday afternoon conversations by phone. And others of us just need to, connect in other ways. But these are all special people to me, and they're all over the world. And so this poem, it's called The Wobbling Body-Long Bubble of Concern. And it's about this sort of bubble that I imagine sort of encompasses our circle of friends, or our circle of our sphere, our circle of influence, if you will. The wobbling body-long bubble of concern was brought down around you by the cosmic bubble blower before you were born, an uber womb you'll be born from only when you die. You wear it everywhere. And when your self-concern turns from your own to someone else's troubles, then yours and the other person's bubbles merge into a newer, bigger bubble with a wider wobble, no matter how far from one another you go. One can consider easily so that the world is little more than a bubbulous agglomeration of polymorphous vens whose intersections contain and recontain. On a plane, my concern fills the cabin. In an Uber or a bus, my concern encompasses both or all of us. If a fellow citizen doubts aloud my patriotism, I can feel the wobble in my bosom, but I cannot exclude him. And when I'm gone and my bubble is burst, it won't be lost on those who were in it, whether they knew they were in it or not for a minute. For I believe, again, so easily, that love is more a practice than a test, and that it is felt or lends a shimmer or offers comfort, no matter if it's unexpressed and well after it's given, and that its sudden shatter is soundless and invisibly beautiful, like the drying of a kiss is, a shape unshaping itself into a billion blisses. I asked Linda if there were any poems she'd like to hear. I know she had a hard day today, so she's given me a very short list, and I'm going to mix those in to the reading today. But first I want to read a poem about my daughter called At the Sofitel, which demarcates one end, perhaps, of the recovery that she hinted at in her beautiful introduction. My daughter and I have been estranged now for 8 years. She's 22 at the moment. And so it's been a long absence throughout her adolescence and young adulthood. And I have struggled mightily with it. And my travels, to some extent, were an attempt to come to terms with it. I don't know if you can see this, but I just want to show the shape of it. This is why I love sharing my work with the screen share option, but the poem has a kind of vertical, diagonal build to it. And it's meant to imitate the funicular in Budapest. It's a little red vehicle on a track that once you get inside, it takes you up the hillside in a kind of diagonal direction. And it's kind of built like a sort of stepped car. So that's the shape of the poem. So this was written in Budapest. At the Sofitel in Budapest, alone, regretting leaving, estranged from my daughter, 6 years almost, believing it might be 6 and 6 more before she texts or answers when I call. Trying to remember how it all began, I find that I can. Every ball thrown at her, every tear, every tatter, very matter-of-factly now, I can recall exactly. Even so, I saw her at the funicular today in her old winter downs, 12 years younger, chattering away. I reached to help her up before I became aware she had her own father there, clutching his past. And we rose while I fell, the tall Sofitel and the Danube gliding away outside the glass. Sophie, tell your story. Say you're sorry or not sorry. Sophie, tell of life, your studies, your plans. From Sofitel to Sofitel I go. It's a mockery. Soundproof doors closing behind me, as if a quiet so bad could be improved. Sophie, tell Dad how much longer you plan to be the stronger one, unmoving, unmovable, unmoved. I don't think that poem, I hope that poem doesn't come off as bitter, but Linda did mention bitterness in her introduction, and I'm intrigued by that. She has mentioned it before, and I've often wondered about it. It's I think it's true of a different poem in the collection, and I want to read that one because I'm not afraid of exploring this theme if Linda wants to pick it up with me later. This is called Fairer, and it's a very short little poem. Another aspect of my recovery was recovering from a lot of very dangerous relationships in my life. Most of them with women, and I take full responsibility for my share of the way things played out, but there are also things that I'm still even now in my new relationships, recovering from. And this poem attempts to explore some of that, and I grant you the tone, Linda, is not exactly forgiving. Fairer, the claw marks in my neck, long faded, the steam of hate evaporated, attempted identity theft subverted, assets, passwords, passport converted, accusations of assault reversed, 2 years court fees reimbursed, restraining orders at last elapsed, libelous campaigns collapsed, attempts to turn my friendships rotten, and threats of murder and vengeance forgotten. I'm finally ready, whatever comes next, to re-engage the fairer sex. So we're talking about sex, we might as well talk about bisexuality, which makes its appearance in this 4th collection for the first time for my career. And I think it opens through the course of maybe 3 or 4 poems, but it opens with this one. And it turns out to be one of Linda's favorites as well. A man pulls a sweater over his shirt. I often, because I travel so much alone, I have the wonderful luxury of sitting and watching people, which is one of my favorite things to do. And of course, this activity is encouraged all over Europe and in countries where people linger long, all by themselves over a cup of coffee, mornings or afternoons. And one day I just took it upon myself to just describe how it is that a man who is just in the simple act of pulling a sweater over his head captures my complete attention. And I tried to do that in words. A man pulls a sweater over his shirt. First, he's got to uninvert inside out parts outside right, and wrangling the whole thing roughly into a loop, rope himself about the neck, and with a flick, free up the mane at the back. Next comes that mummery of wrists, by which, in summary, fists clamp stiffly over shirt sleeve ends to keep them from disappearing during the enduring rearranging of limb and clothing that's coming. Now then, up into his own cable knits he dives, both fistfuls at once, in order to work with a plumping motion, the scarf-like commotion of cotton more open. He's a god of muffled thunder, shoulder high in a churning cloud formation. At last, one arm at a time must find and climb into its funnel, elbows winching by twists. The empty lists of tunnel fill up with checks as sleeve with sleeve is matched. Each diver survives, emerges, its clutch of cuff intact, released. As if handling something hot from the oven, he shakes the whole chore off and then slices a scissors of fingers back into each bunchy nozzle to puzzle his unbuttoned barrel flaps flat on skin over catch of watch or kink of bracelet latch. It seems he's won the match, but wait, he isn't done. One thumb goes thumbs down into the collar, where its job is to fix what's riding there and confirm the tag's not flagging, while his other hand is nagging his Oxford's box plate straight, restuffing it into the band of his pants so the rumpled jumper can fall flatter. And sir, while you're down there, a pinky discreetly slipped can double check that things are zipped. And then it's only a scant matter of luffing the pullover's lower quarter to be certain it isn't caught and that it curtains where it ought. And now the horse's blanket straight, he's ready for the saddle, pack, or whatever waits await at work, at the service of city slicker or farmer, thicker and a little warmer. Here's another poem, I think, inspired by men, at least by the unique kind of manhood connection with other men that I feel when I walk into a barber shop. I often get my hair cut at salons too, and I have no preference really, but it's interesting when you walk into a kind of traditional man's, barber shop, what kind of comes over one. And I get a little bit nostalgic in them. And this is a poem about that. It's called Why Empty Barbershops Draw Me, I Don't Know. It's romantic. I end up snapping photos through the windows. Chair convened there by chair by chair. Mirrored, clean. Someone the night before having swept up all the cut hair. Light streaming in from the street, printing whatever's on the glass backwards onto the floor. The closed sign askew in the door. We do want community, don't we? But we also don't. We want to be held close and left alone. We want to talk when we want to talk, and we want sometimes instead to sit quietly while someone touches us all about the head with the edges of a scissoring scissor and the neat teeth of a comb. Small comfort, but lucky for us, the wealthy as well as the poor, that there are a few things left in this old world we still need other people for. Linda, how are we doing? What's that? 1732, I see.
Yeah, I mean, we are good. Can we have a couple more?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's see.
I have to tell you, this shirt poem makes me think of nothing so much as Nicholson Baker in the mezzanine, describing when the narrator describes tying is shoe tying, and it captures in all those ineffables, the things we never really knew we do, the little, which lace goes where, what finger goes where, which holds, and it was a revelation to me. And I feel the same extraordinary joy in the material world, and really care for it. And it's one of the things I most admire about your work, is that capacity to, at some level, go to school to the world around us and find refreshment there. It's a very, very important gift, Todd, and it's one you share with us. It's really significant. It really matters.
Wow, thank you. That's so beautiful. Is that in a book of his? Is it in a collection of?
It's the mezzanine is, I think it's his first novel. And it's very Nicholson Baker. And I mean, I can send you an email, but
thank you.
It's and I bet they have it at Literati, or will eagerly order it. I have my poets read it sometimes, because I mean, it's quite a revelation. It's just it all takes place in the course of this guy coming back from lunch, riding the escalator up to the mezzanine in his office building, but then it wanders a little bit. But it's extraordinary, and it's again, it's the sort of noticing that is all those things we cultivate actually oblivion to. And so it's wild. It's absolutely it's an experimental novel, and one that's so hospitable to all of us. We can all enter it and recognize moment by moment and find, well, anyway, a lot of synapses light firing as we notice. But that poem,
isn't it funny? Isn't it strange what wild magic there is in just a simple observation, a simple act of describing a thing.
And the patience, but of course you do much more. I mean, it's just that sort of gorgeous music with which you endow. I mean, clearly at some level you discover it in the world and then you re-endow it so we can enjoy. But okay, two more poems.
Okay, two more. And you asked me for two more, so I'm going to give you the two that you asked for. This one comes toward the end of the volume. It's called 9 Voices at St. Martin's, and I did read it within the hour of returning home from St. Martin's in the Fields, little church in London, after having this very experience. And I really didn't embroider much at all. I sat down, wrote it, read it out loud to a companion, and felt implicitly that it was finished. That very rarely happens for me, but this poem was one of those moments. 9 Voices at St. Martin's. I am not a believer, nor do I believe in disbelief. I'm not too proud for anything, and neither facts nor fictions frighten me. I'm comfortable holding a stranger's gaze, and I often feel God or something godly gazing back. My life is full of the usual urgent, unnecessary and necessary distractions. But yesterday in London with a friend, I descended into the Crypt Cafe and then wandered upward into St. Martin's, where a choir of 9 was not so much singing as releasing birds of hymnody into the airy sanctuary, lilting flocks of wingy sounds. And by the time they finally began Abide With Me, I was openly weeping in my row, my friend kindly nesting my hand. And the world took on that forest glade glow it gets when you know beauty may be found. And suddenly, this simple, sturdy, clear windowed temple with its weather vane steeple was my favorite of all Europe's showy churches, and London's people seemed the finest people. And it didn't seem at all odd to find myself here, that there should be a God, or that God, whether soul or energy or light, might be right there, abiding in the patterns of voices in mid-flight, or the patter of rain on Duncannon Street. I mopped my face with my pocket square and stuffed it back away, and wanted more, would have stayed all day, but one more tune and they were done and filed away behind the altar, where no doubt they folded their books and packed their packs and bloomed their umbrellas into the afternoon and crossed into the underground and queued ordinarily for the train. If I passed one going home, I didn't recognize, I didn't know to praise them for my opened ears, my opened eyes, the music my own train made as it wheeled, the colors of the sky, the brick towns passing by, the trees on the ridgeline, and the horses in the field. And the last one I'll close with, even though it's not a happy poem in some ways, it is a happy poem in others. It's a poem about the earth. As Linda mentioned, she does make an appearance, just like that little old lady in the opening poem. This little old lady does a slightly different dance. It's called She's Going to Be Beautiful. And I wrote it before leaving on my journey, and it sort of kept tugging at me throughout my travels and ended up in this collection. The Earth too is on an epic journey during our brief stay here, and I thought that seemed a fitting connection to the themes of the book. She's going to be beautiful as she goes, isn't she? Gorgeous plumes of cinder, blooming rose in dying light. She's going to give a stunning show. The melting ice, the slow decay of zones. Our drones will play it all in full HD and lavish insult on the injury. All the satellite imagery, the National Geo photography. She's going to be calendar worthy stuff, if ever again a calendar there be. Like forcing someone to disrobe and wishing you don't want to watch. The moon will touch her everywhere goodbye. An elephant, the last, inelegantly, will pass in a savanna gleaming gold. The cloud formations no one's ever seen in towers shimmering with ash, we will no longer wonder to behold. All the coastal cities under sea. She will be beautiful, of course she will, and devastatingly.
And that was devastatingly beautiful itself. Todd, thank you so, so much. I wish I could send some of these poems to every human on the planet. And well, I mean, your aptitude for praise poem is really, I mean, and both those last two were instances, both, you know, that surprise and the discovery of the face of God, you know, in nine voices who may scatter to tube stations, and that tribute to this beautiful, magnificent, fragile planet. We are lucky enough to be a part of for this brief moment. I mean, that and you know the Bubbles poem about that, but that instinct for connectedness, that profound. It's clear that you apprehend that, you believe in it, you discover it again and again and again, and I think you know are failing to see that, are failing to remember to feel it. Is what ails us. It's why we're slaughtering one another on this planet. It's just, it's too good. I've been watching, my husband and I are watching a very, very long, like many CD or what they, DVR, whatever they are, those kinds of things you play on television screens, DVDs, of War and Peace, like tons and tons, hours.
Oh, wow.
And so right before the Battle of Borodino, you know, there's a, you know, the narrator voicing Tolstoy says, you know, and that human beings against all human reason and all human instinct are about to slaughter one another. And I think, you know, that breaks my heart, because it's the against all human reason. Yes, indeed. Against all human instinct, if only this were. And there's something, so there's such a touchstone again and again in your work. And I am so grateful for it. I truly am. Now, I think our listeners and those who are going to be watching this later on are going to be very interested in hearing you say a little bit more about your travels. I mean, I'm sure among the instincts, people are going to be stunned with envy and say, "Oh my God, he can do that. I could do that." And he's clearly breathing. You know, he doesn't seem to have like wasted away. He hasn't been thrown into some horrible prison. But all the practical things, but also doing it and then being overtaken. I mean, having accompanying you on this extraordinary journey, this pandemic, coming along for the ride. I mean, have been amazing.
I was 2 years traveling before the pandemic hit, and then I've been traveling since here in the States with longer stays and more concrete rentals, not house sitting, because the house sitting opportunities all dried up, you know, with COVID too. Nobody wanted strangers in their homes anymore. So it's been a different kind of itinerant life here in the States since COVID started. But yeah, you can survive this and do it. I honestly wasn't trusting myself entirely when I did start selling all my belongings. I'm down to 2 suitcases. That's all I own in the world now. And when I think one day I was rolling up my rug and it was on Craigslist, and I had someone stopping by for my beloved bicycle downstairs, and I had already sold my car, you know, I started kind of panicking. I had this little panic, like, what am I doing? I'm going to have to, you know, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to have to reestablish myself. I won't have anything left to start my life with. And then the very next day, I was panicking in a different way about getting rid of all my dishes and kitchen stuff. You know, there's all that stuff. Like, what do you do with all that stuff? And a woman knocked on the door. and she said, I'm moving in next door. I just wanted to apologize because my mom and I are going to be making a lot of noise moving me in. And I thought, do you need kitchen supplies? and I opened all my cabinets, and they came and they took everything I had.
Wow.
Beautiful white things, and all my silver, linens.
Beautiful.
And I mean, it was just like, wow, yeah, that's wonderful. And they were thrilled. And so I took that with me. That was something that I took on the road with me. And then I thought, after 6 months, I'll be sick of this. I'll be sick of not being able to get my mail. I'll be sick of not being able to access healthcare. Something is going to happen to me, right? But 6 months turned into a year, and a year turned into 2, and 2 to 4. And it's remarkable how little I regret and how much of it I don't miss. Even my books, I had like you behind you, shelves full.
Oh, the mess! I can't fit them.
And I loved my books, and I ended up giving most of them to a prison literacy project. And then
good for you.
Those that I really couldn't part with, that I hoped someday to encounter again, I gave to a friend who is enjoying the heck out of them right now. But even those, I don't miss them. I feel rather the freedom from the burden of them, and my mind is clearer for not having them in my life, to be honest. And this is a lifestyle I think I'll live for quite a while.
I'm stunned. I mean, I really am. It's so beyond any act of courage I can imagine committing myself. It's just wild. I mean, but I talk again, bringing back to the poems. This must alter what it has been like for you to write. I mean, I would assume what it's been like for you to write these past 4 years. I mean, I write, surrounded by my stuff, the books I can run to. If I'm truly maddeningly stuck on a line, I can go do the laundry and feel as though the day hasn't been entirely wasted, or I, somehow. And you've divested yourself of alibis, among other things. So tell us.
I still do laundry. From time to time, and that takes me out of myself. There's always a walk. There are always distractions, that you can put on your life. Gosh, you put that so beautifully. I'm not really sure where to begin. I mean, I've never been an academic writer in the sense of leaning very heavily into any particular. I don't teach. I don't need materials and resources around me like you do, Linda. So that frees me significantly more than I think you would be capable of, at least now while you're teaching. I don't know. What happens to you when you go to London? Do you have books there?
We basically have duplicates of tons of our books.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, I've been there where I'm having to write a long promised essay on X, Y, or Z, done, or milk.
Exactly.
I mean, and I'm just,
no, you have to.
What am I going to do?
No, yeah.
But also I think there's a part of me that's just haplessly situated in the domestic. I just think, it's no longer available to choice. But yeah. So but you must have a computer with you, do you? You carry a computer?
I have a laptop that comes with me everywhere. That's really my only office. I keep all my lists on one page. This is my to-do list. And that'll fit in my pocket, my back pocket. This is my notebook. It's one of these, so it'll fit in a shirt pocket or a jacket pocket. And that's for an office. That's about all I have. And then I have some summer clothes and some winter clothes packed into 2 carry-on size suitcases and a couple of pairs of shoes. When I need shoes, you know, and I'm in a particular location that I'm not totally prepared for, I just buy them, and then I'll have them for the months that I'm there, the 6-9 months that I'm there, which is kind of the use that you'd get out of a pair of shoes anyway. At least the way that I walk through them.
Right.
And then, you know, my car, I had a car during the pandemic because I had my son for a year and a half during the pandemic as well. And it
How
made
old
it
is he?
easier. He's 19. It made it a lot easier to get to work and such when he had a job and stuff like that. So I had a car in Arizona, and that was a lot of fun. We off-roaded. It was a good Subaru, you know, there was nowhere we couldn't go. And then when I went to LA, I thought, well, now I'm in LA. I'll be there for 9 months. I'm stuck with it because you have to have a car in LA. And then I thought, well, do you have to have a car in LA? I wonder if that's just a robust kind of, you know, status symbol mixed with a myth about, you know, and then so I started dabbling with the public transportation system, and by God, it's just as good as anywhere. I mean, well, not anywhere, but it's pretty darn good. And so I started zipping around on the bus systems, and I sold my car within a couple of weeks, and I'm thrilled to have no car anymore. So that's
Heroic.
yeah.
Listen,
yeah, well,
I'm
go ahead.
Go ahead, please. No, go ahead.
Oh, that's all. That's all.
I'm going to invite John to come back to us and share with us any questions that there may be that may have arrived in the chat.
We don't have any questions just yet. I will encourage any of our viewers to submit them if they have any, but I imagine that they, like me, are wrapped in getting to listen to both of you talk. So Linda, I'm happy to turn it back over to you for any, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions that you might like to ask Todd.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, one of the things, I mean, I mentioned that this sort of following sonic paths in your poems, which is an enormous delight as a reader. I'm just swept along. But I also take particular joy in something that may not have, for those of our listeners who don't yet know your work on the page, what they may not know is how many of those gorgeous rhymes and echoes are, they're not end rhymes. They'll be buried in the middle of a line and then show up on the end of a line, some later, and then another. And that weaving, for me, just adds an extra layer of pleasure. But it becomes, when I read your poems, an extra feature of the architecture. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that sort of embedded rhyme, as opposed to the more traditional end rhyme.
Gosh, I love that word, architecture. But by that, I imagine that you mean that it's structural, and that you're and that you encounter it almost as a physical thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with solidity, with real sort of, as they say, structural integrity.
Yeah.
There's a very solid holding together feel to it.
Well, you know, after how many houses? 60 houses in the past 5 years that I've lived in, you know, 60 kitchens, you know, learning 60 kitchens, learning 60 neighborhoods, learning, you know, all these different pets and animals and farms, and some gardens where I could eat out of the garden, you know, while I was there. It makes me think, what your question makes me think about is the comfort of finding a stair post, a newel post, you know, at the bottom of the stairs that's softened from use, and that just sort of feels good every time you touch it, whether you think of it or not. And it's that kind of it's not comfort that I'm after, though. It's surprise. I love, what I love about those buried rhymes is that even after I've forgotten the poem, you know, they're memorized for a period of time, and then they're no longer, and then I have to re-encounter them as I read them or find them again. And when I do, it's finding those little newel posts along the way. It's more than comfort. It does comfort, but it also is just such a surprise to know that I know my way around that house still after so long, even in the dark. And that sense that the structure of the home is awaiting me, that whether I knew it or not is what I love about it.
There's a beautiful Tracy Kidder years ago wrote. He's the author of Soul of a New Machine. That was his very first book, and it was this big. It was the first time anybody was really going to do something about computers, and this was like way back, mid 80s. But the next book he wrote is called House, and he just followed this carpenter around while he built a house from the very beginning and he has to the end. I mean, he would just, and all the sort of fittings together and this things one simply doesn't know unless one really does that. And this was a, beautifully crafted house. There was nothing, prefab about any of its components. And Kidder has this beautiful paean to the staircase and what an act of social trust it is when carpenters devise a staircase.
Yeah.
Because, the stairs are at predictable intervals and how much depends on that, and how much we do when we go up them and down them by instinct, and how much we're actually, unbeknownst to ourselves, in conversation with the one who built them, trusting us to be, anyway, it was wonderful. And so that's the kind of thing I hear you describing. We're almost out of time. So last question, what next?
What next? Children. I have a children's book that's due out from Simon & Schuster next summer. Hey, you didn't know that?
No.
It's called The Boy Who Said Wow, and it's based on a true story of a boy who in Boston surprised everyone by exclaiming "wow" after a performance of Mozart in the hall, and it was caught on radio tape, and 70 million people, it went viral. 70 million people have heard that little utterance, and he turns out to be an autistic boy, a nonverbal autistic boy. They didn't even know, his parents, that he knew the word wow. And he very rarely speaks in the moment. He speaks about things in the past or things that he desires, but never really in the moment. So I interviewed the family and got very intimate with this story and wrote it up as a children's book. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that come to life.
I can't wait to read it. I cannot wait to read it. John is back. Thank you so much, Todd.
Linda, thank you so much.
This
was I knew it would be a really precious hour, but I didn't know it would be this precious. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Oops, am I not? Hold on. Oh, there I am.
You're there.
Thank you both for yes, a really magnificent hour. Todd, thank you for sharing your poems with us. Linda, thank you for sharpening our understanding of them with your mind. We can't thank you both enough, and hopefully we'll have opportunity to have similar conversation in the store in the not too distant future, Todd, if you make our way to the peninsula. But until then, hope you both are well, and to all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening, and we'll see you at the next event. Take care, everybody.
John.
Thanks,
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.